All right, good afternoon and welcome to this special content connection lunch and learn for Rancho Public Schools. Today we're going to be having a live Q&A for questions regarding the new social studies instructional material that will be adopted next year. I'm joined again by Erica Lozano, who is the Secondary Curriculum and Instruction Coordinator for the district. Before we get started, I just wanted to run through some short housekeeping items. Erica will touch a little bit more on this in her brief presentation at the start, but I just wanted to, again, welcome everybody. I want to remind you this is a live meeting, so you'll have an opportunity to ask questions regarding the instructional material in just a little bit. So I want to remind you, please keep questions appropriate related to the content at hand. We're going to have a system of raising hands for questions, so Erica will kind of review that before we get started. But if we're ready to go, Erica, I'll go ahead and pass it off to you.
Awesome, thank you, Wyndham, and good afternoon. It is officially noon, so we are in the second half of the day here. Thank you for joining us. As folks sign on today, if we have more people join us, I'll take a second to pause and let everyone know how we're interacting. But I'm just really excited to be able to get to answer any questions that arise today. I'm going to share just a few things really quickly before we get started. So like Wyndham said, today's session really is dedicated entirely to answering any questions that any members of the Rio Rancho Public Schools community have regarding our new standards and our instructional resources. This is being recorded, so even if questions aren't asked during the live session, if anybody has questions, I'll be referencing where feedback can be given or where future questions can be asked. And then also, if anyone wants to review the responses to the questions posed in today's session, they can do so by going to our RRPS YouTube channel. So I've said this in every session that we've had. This is session 7 and our final session for this school year for our Lunch and Learn content connection meetings. But I've said it every time in regards to the puzzle pieces that you see on the slides throughout our presentation. And again, it symbolizes the way that here at Curriculum and Instruction we feel about our community. We're all a piece of the puzzle that comes together to paint the big picture of success and support for the students that we serve. And so I just want to thank you for being here and being one of the many pieces of the puzzle that come together to support our students. And let me pause real quick, Wyndham, and you're able to let people in. Perfect. Welcome if you're just joining us. So again, if this is your first time joining us, my name is Erica Lozano. I'm the Secondary Coordinator for Social Studies and English Language Arts for secondary education. So that means that I serve and support all of our teachers in grades 6 through 12 through those 2 content areas. And in that, I get to support all of the students that we serve in grades 6 through 12 as well. Outside of my daytime job, I am the mom of 2 boys, and one is currently a Rio Rancho Public School student, and then I have one who will be joining us in about a year here. So I'm always thinking through the lens of both a teacher, a former classroom teacher, the teachers that we serve, and then also as a parent of a Rio Rancho Public Schools student. And I usually take a moment just to share something kind of quirky or fun about myself. This time I just want to share that I'm really excited for next year. When I think back over the last year and all of the work that our teachers have done and the input that we've received from our community, including our students, the work has been tremendous, and we're just excited to dive into the work for next year. Welcome everyone who's just joining us. Good to see you. And then just to recap where we landed, last time we met, which was on April 12th, we took time to look into the actual student version of the instructional resources that were going to be presented to the Board of Education. That meeting on April 24th has now passed. If you are not aware, we're excited about the fact that all of our recommendations to the Board of Education for instructional materials for grades 6 through 12 in social studies were unanimously approved by the board. So we're in the process now of making sure that our teachers get their resources for this summer. Our education technology department is working with the publishers to make sure that we are ready to run the minute that we welcome students back, I believe on August 2nd and 3rd, if I've got the calendar down correctly. And then we're in the process of ordering all of the student materials so that they're ready and waiting for students as they come back to school in August. So again, our purpose for today really is just to answer any questions that you have in relation to our standards and our instructional resources for social studies. If you're joining me today as an elementary school student parent or the parent of an elementary school student, that sounds a little more natural. I do want to say that everything that I'll be addressing today really is specific to grades 6 through 12. Our secondary team works very collaboratively with our elementary team, so I'm aware of their pathway and what they're doing right now in regards to professional learning for teachers around those standards. But I can't speak specifically to resources at the elementary level. However, I'm more than happy to share how and when you can obtain some additional information if you have questions about K-5. And then lastly, before I turn it over to you, I just want to go over some norms for our discussion today. Right now, everybody is muted, and I know I am very guilty of this. Sometimes you unmute, and then you get, if you've got kiddos at home or something happens at home, and you forget to mute your mic, Wyndham is able to mute you again. So if we hear any background noise, somebody on our team might hit the mute button if you're already done talking, just so that we can make sure that each person's voice is heard. But we'll make sure you're done with your question before we do that. Please use the chat only for questions. I want to make sure that our conversation stays with our group. So if we have back and forth comments in the chat, I might miss them, and then I don't have an opportunity to really engage everyone. It's also hard if someone's on their phone. Sometimes they don't see the chat, and then we don't all have the privilege of hearing your thoughts and your questions. I also just want to ask everyone to please share the mic. I know a lot of us are very passionate about social studies, and so we have lots of questions, but if we could kind of give everybody a space to ask what they have come here to ask today, I would really appreciate your help with that. And then again, if you have additional comments or if you'd like to talk to me further about something that warrants a longer conversation, I'm going to have, and you can see it now in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, there is a link to a feedback form. You can list comments there and you can provide me your email address, and I can always follow up with you if you'd like to further the conversation. And then last but not least, I just want to ask everybody to assume positive intent in others. We're all here to learn together in a collaborative way, and that includes the people on my team, and it includes me. These shifts in our social studies standards are a big change for everybody, but they're a really positive change. But we are all still learning, and it's a really exciting journey that we're all on together. When you do have a question, please try to raise your hand first so I can kind of keep track of who needs to ask a question, and leave your hand raised until your question has been answered. And then once your question has been answered, you can click that little hand button again, and it will go away when you're done asking your question. Okay, I'll leave this up here in case you need to reference it, but other than that, I think we're ready for questions. So if somebody wants to raise their hand, and we'll get started if you've got questions. If you can't access the hand, go ahead and just unmute and ask.
What are the biggest changes to the curriculum that we should be aware of?
Thanks, Valerie. I appreciate you asking that. So I think the best way to summarize the changes come through our instructional shifts. And in just a moment here, I will put up a link in the chat, and then also at the let me actually show you really quickly. So, and I was going to put this up at the end, but maybe I'll put this up here right now. So if you go onto our website, you can view what are called the instructional shifts for social studies. And that is there are 5 of them. And they really are, the analogy that we've used this year is that of a tree. And the trunk of the tree are our content standards. So that really is the strength of the content that is social studies. But those standards are grounded, and so the roots of those standards are the 5 instructional shifts. And I would say within those, there's 2 really big changes. Number one, and I wouldn't say changes per se, I think they're more shifts in a particular direction. So one of them is really surrounding inquiry for students. So instead of the teachers asking or always asking the questions, now there's a shift towards students being able to develop their own questions around topics that they're studying, and then to sustain pursuing an answer to that question over the course of a unit of study. I don't know about you guys, but like when I was in social studies classes in high school, it was often I got a question asked of me, and then my teacher presented all the information I needed to know, and then I answered the question. And while that's a great skill, we want our students to be able to learn how to ask those questions as well. And so that's one of the big shifts, is now we're moving from placing some of the agency and advocacy on the part of the student to do that investigating and that inquiry themselves. And then I think the second biggest shift is, it's the first one that you'll see on the document. And again, I'll make sure that you have access to that as well. But it's shifting away from a dominant narrative, which in another way means making sure that there are multiple perspectives represented in any topic, era, or unit that students study. So just hearing from different voices from different eras during a particular time in history. So I would say, in a nutshell, those are the biggest shifts leading into next year.
What would you say the focus will be on? Is it going to be pivoting from facts and instructional material like that and moving towards some sort of different agenda is my question.
Sure. No, that's a great question. So when I think about like when I look at our new instructional resources, for instance, most of our, well, I should say all of our units of study start with an essential question, or what's called a compelling question. And that is a question that guides students to really think more deeply about the facts that they are analyzing. So I think it's not necessarily that the content is changing in any way. The content is broadening and expanding to include more perspectives, more voices, more stories, and then students are studying that to get a broader picture of what happened in history, and also to analyze moving forward what they've learned from history, how to be citizens moving forward into the future, and really establishing their own agency and advocacy in the future as citizens of a community.
Is it pertaining to like CRT or anything like that?
No, not CRT.
So if it's not CRT, what would it be?
I think going back to those instructional shifts is I don't know if there's and I have not heard of a label. We are continuing to teach social studies. Our charge is to teach the standards and to adopt instructional resources that support the standards. But there is not I know that sometimes CRT is identified as an embedded agenda within a curriculum, and that is not something that's in place here.
And that's my biggest question is what are the changes, and because this isn't like something that's normal and done yearly, right? When was the last time we had a change like this?
Thanks, that's a great question. So the last time that the standards were changed, which that's at the state level, so that the process that the state goes through to either revise or completely change the standards is something that there's and I don't know all of the specifics because I was not involved at the state level, but that is a whole process in and of itself. And then all public schools and public districts within the state are charged with ensuring that students have access to those standards at each grade level. So the last time that the standards were revised at the state level was in 2009. And then 2019 is when the revision process began for the new standards, and then they are required for students to be engaged with the new standards starting this next school year. So for us, that's August of 2023. And then in terms of instructional materials, you're absolutely right. This is not a yearly thing. So the last time that social studies was up for an adoption was 6 years ago. So the state works on a 6-year cycle. And so as a district, we go through the adoption process where we form a committee and we evaluate for an entire committee has been working together since September. And so at the end of that year, after resources are evaluated, they're recommended to the Board of Education, and then the Board of Education either approves or denies the recommendation, and it was approved on April 24th. So you're right, it is not an every year thing. And I think to go back to your question about what's the biggest change, I would go back to those instructional shifts. And it is just that, it's a shift. So the standards were not like wiped completely clean and everything is brand new. Instead, they were updated and revised. And then those shifts really reflect what those updates and revisions kind of encompass. But thank you. Those are great questions. What other questions can I answer?
And Erica, I'm going to jump in real quick.
Sure.
Again, if you wouldn't mind just utilizing that hand raising function through Google Meet, it'll help us to kind of keep things organized and let us know when somebody has a question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, so I may have missed this part of it, but the additional voices and stories from the same time period, can you give us an example of what those voices and stories would be or are expected to be?
Sure, I think it absolutely depends on what's being studied. So, you know, when you think about
so specifically to, let's say 1860s to 1870s, 1920s to 1956, and then the 60s to present.
Sure. So that's something that like I said, I'm working with 6th through 12th grade, so I don't want to misrepresent what's in our materials. So I'd be more than happy if you wanted to, on that bit.ly link that you can see on the screen, if you wanted to leave me your information, or I'll put we have the email here as well. You can also email me, and then I can follow up with you to get you that information specifically. But I like I said, I don't want to misquote what's in the resources. So I would appreciate an opportunity to make sure I'm accurate with what I share.
Thank you.
Sure. And when I think the analogy I like to use is this. I think we all have that person that we know that maybe within our family or in a group of friends, there's the person who's the storyteller, right? And So you start to understand history through a certain perspective, and then somebody comes along and they tell you their story of an event that happened, and so you start to get their perspective too. And so nothing has changed about what happened, but the listener, the person who is hearing the stories, their understanding of that event is broadened and deepened and enriched. And so I think you'll see as we start to look at how those voices and perspectives are being broadened, that's exactly the experience of our students, is that they're going to hear a lot of the same content that we might have heard when we were students, but now we're expanding that as well. And if anybody does want very specific examples, I'm more than happy to get you those. And I also want to let you know that, and then Valerie, I'm going to get to your question. When you go to our website that's listed here on the slide that you can see, you can still access our instructional materials, the digital versions. And so, Brian, if you wanted to go in and actually pull up a unit from, and the units that you were talking about, you'd have to look at, for the first time period, you have to look at 8th grade. And then for the second and third time period that you mentioned, you'd look at 11th grade U.S. history. You can go in and see exactly what students will be learning about there as well. Valerie. Oh, Valerie, I think you're still muted.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries.
Like to request a copy of the same materials, please.
Sure. If you wouldn't mind, and let me make sure I write your names down too. Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind just either send me an email to that RRPS content@rrps.net, and then that way I can make sure I have your contact information, and I will absolutely send you that information. Other questions? And like Wyndham said, please feel free to click on that hand icon. One of the things that, and maybe while you're kind of thinking of some other questions that you have, we explored this a little bit at one of our former sessions, but one of the new resources that we're going to have going into the new school year is it's maybe like 5 or 6 slides long, but every grade level and every unit will have an introductory presentation that will go home to families and will also be posted in Google Classrooms for students. And that will look at a couple things. Number one, it'll show parents what the compelling question is for the unit. So when we talked earlier about students asking questions that spark and sustain inquiry, you'll be able to see, okay, during the next 6 weeks, this is the question that my child is going to be studying and that they're going to be pursuing, and they'll be developing other questions around that particular kind of big overarching question for the unit. And it'll also share with you what standards are being taught within the unit so that you can explore those further if you'd like. And then it'll give you an overview of what kind of activities and assessments students will engage in. And I think, like, I don't know about you, but for me as the parent of an elementary student, elementary has brand new ELA resources this year, and I have really appreciated getting a one-page document at the start of each new unit that tells me exactly what my son's going to be learning, and it's really helped me to have those conversations at home. It's helped me to have conversations with the teacher when I have questions. And so we're hoping that as a content team, that those resources will help you as parents and community members as well if you're working directly with one of our 6th or 12th grade students. Are there any any other questions that have kind of popped up as we've been talking? Okay, well, if we don't have any other questions, I'll say just a couple more things, and then if you do have another question that comes up, please feel free to raise your hand, and I'll pause to answer your question. I do want to encourage everybody to either jot down or maybe take a screenshot of your screen right now so you have these links. But our website that we have, it really was built for the purpose of ensuring that the community had access to our instructional materials and our standards while we were going throughout the process this year. But I found that I'm referencing it more and more when I'm talking to members of the community. We put a lot of resources on that website that are super helpful. And so I encourage you to explore that website. I'll probably continue to add to it over the course of the next year as we're learning as a community and we're getting to know the new standards and the new resources together. Because it really is, I think a lot of the resources on there, we have documents and resources that are designed specifically for teachers, but sometimes even me as an educator, the resources for parents, I think publishers and even we know that how busy you are and how many hats you wear, and so it really condenses and summarizes the information in a really beautiful way that I think resonates with a lot of folks. So I would encourage you to hop on the website and explore as well. Yeah, Taylor, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to comment actually that I'm actually for one really excited about the new materials, especially the more interactive piece of some of them, because I just feel that students these days it's difficult to have a boring kind of linear text to read, and so I feel like the interactive piece of it is really going to benefit the students.
Yeah, great. Thank you for mentioning that. Our committee was really excited about that too, and I think you're absolutely right. So it's I definitely remember classes where it was memorize the facts and take the test, and then you could cram it all in your mind and then let it go. And now I studied history in college, and when I go back and think about, oh gosh, like I do remember learning about that a little bit, but I had no idea how cool this event was or how cool this person from history was. And I made connections that I hadn't made when I just had to memorize, regurgitate, and move on. And so that interactive piece really speaks to the way that and not just the way that our students learn today, but the multiple and diverse ways that our students learn. We have a lot of options for how students can demonstrate their learning, a lot of options for how students are assessed on their learning. And so, yeah, we're pretty excited about it. Well, if we don't have any more questions for today, again, I just want to direct you to the slide that you see in front of you. Those are great resources to go to not only communicate with us, but also to continue your own learning and your own exploration of the new standards and the new instructional materials that were approved by our board not too long ago. So, and then as students start to engage in the content next year, if you have any questions, please keep that email address handy. Feel free to reach out. Our teachers are also engaging in professional learning around these new resources. And so as they continue to learn and to dive deeper into the resources themselves, they're great. They're great people to reach out to as well. And then like I said, I support our secondary teachers in social studies. And so if if there's something that they can't answer, I'll work together collaboratively with them, and we'll get you the information that you're seeking. All right. Well, Wyndham, I don't know if you have any final thoughts, but it looks like no one has any further questions for right now. But I want to thank those of you who joined us today, even if it was just to listen in and learn alongside us. And for those of you who posed questions, thank you. I really have enjoyed this year being able to have conversations with members of our community. I really appreciate the opportunity to just hear from you. It really helps me as the coordinator for social studies to understand maybe what we need to clarify further, or what we need to communicate about. And so your questions help guide me in a lot of ways. I thank you very much.
Thanks, Erica. I'll just reiterate that. Thank you so much for joining us, not only today, but throughout this school year as we have kind of explored the new social studies instructional materials. If you would like to reference any of the topics that were discussed today, this session will be available on our YouTube channel as well. So feel free to visit that if you want to readdress anything that we've talked about today. And again, I'd like to reiterate, again, if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We're always looking to help answer any questions, especially with instructional material. So thank you, and we hope to hear from you and see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.